Welcome to the Empowerment Hour, a podcast dedicated to the woman ready to take charge of her life, live in her purpose, and be unapologetically authentic. I am your host, Nancy Ruffin, award-winning author, mommypreneur, and the self-proclaimed Latina Oprah who is dedicated to helping women unleash their power, discover their purpose, and live up to their fullest potential. My goal is to empower you, inspire you, and help you unlock your passions and discover your purpose so that you live the most fulfilled and impassioned life. If you're ready to make a change and start living on purpose, then you're in the right place. Let's get started. Welcome to another episode of the Empowerment Hour podcast. You know who it is. It's your girl, Nancy Ruffin, aka The Purpose Professional, and I am back for another week, getting you focused, on track, and making sure that you are not letting anything or anyone get in your way. So guys, thank you for joining me on another episode. You guys are tuned in every week religiously, and for that, I am extremely grateful. I love doing the podcast. I love being able to connect with you guys in this way. I also really enjoy the feedback that you all provide me, whether it's emails or DMs or comments, under my posts. I really love to see your engagement, see which episodes speak to you most, the ones that connect with you most. I particularly love when I have an episode and you guys reach out to me and just let me know how much you connected with that particular episode that week. It just really affirms for me the importance of sharing my life and being authentic and being genuine and just really giving you guys an inside view on my life, on who I am, and on the work that I do. Because, one of the things that I get a lot of questions on, or rather comments, is the fact that people look at me and they wish, or they tell me that they wish they could do what I do, that they could be as confident as I am. And that is going to be the topic of this week's episode, because I'm going to give you all a bit of my backstory. I really go into a lot of how I got into this kind of work when I host my workshops and when I have certain events. And I realized that I don't think I've ever done a podcast episode where I really kind of delve into how I ended up doing all of this work that I do. But before I get there, I just want to mention, and I know that I've been posting it on my various social media platforms, but for those of you who may not be on social media, the Empowerment Hour podcast is now on iHeartRadio. And I'm so super excited about that, because iHeartRadio is a huge platform that has millions of users. So what it does for me and for the podcast is that it really expands our listenership, and it puts us in a space where we can potentially be heard by hundreds, thousands of listeners. And so I'm super excited about that. And so for those of you who may be Android users or don't have iPhones and can't listen through the iTunes podcast, you can now find us on iHeartRadio.com, or you can download their app onto your phone and listen to us from there. So I just wanted to share that with you guys, because we've been on probably for about a month, and each episode when I'm doing the podcast, I always forget to mention that. So with that being said, February is almost over, guys. We are at the end of the month, and we're almost nearing the end of the first quarter for 2018. And I really want you guys to do a pulse check on where you are with those goals that you set for yourself back in January, right? Remember all those vision boards that we saw people doing, all of the attendees that came to my vision board events. In total, I had over 100 women between both of the workshops that I hosted. So I want you ladies to really go back and look at your roadmaps, look at those goal setting templates that you filled out. I want you to look at each goal. I want you to identify how on track have you been since January with doing the things that you have to do, those small actionable steps to make sure that you're accomplishing your goal. Like, where are you? Are you, falling behind? Are you doing a steady pace where you think you're going to be on track for the deadline that you've given yourself? And I want you to, just to not to be too hard on yourselves, right? Because I know that sometimes we can be, and when we are, we allow ourselves to be in that space for so long that then we don't end up kind of getting back up and, continuing the process. Like, I want you to understand that even though you may get sidetracked, even though you may slow down a bit, or maybe you haven't even started, right? Every single day, every new day is a new opportunity for you to start over. So don't beat yourself up for not being where you thought you would be at this particular point, but just take that as an indicator for yourself to be like, okay, enough of the playing around, enough of the BS. We're already heading into March. I have not accomplished the things that I said I was going to by this point in time, but that's okay. I'm going to start now, and I'm going to start today, and we're going to get ourselves moving in the right direction. So that is what I want you guys to start doing. Don't let yourself sit in that space of, a feeling like you're not good enough or feeling like a failure. Get out of your own head. And as soon as you see or you hear that voice inside of you creeping up, trying to self-sabotage yourself, kick it, right? And karate chop it, do whatever you need to do, but get that voice out of your head and replace it with positive affirmations, knowing that yesterday's failure, you don't have to take into tomorrow's future. At any point in your life, and it doesn't not necessarily have to pertain to your goals, but in any area of your life where you feel like you may be falling off or falling short or not meeting your own expectations, understand that at that very moment when you make that realization, you can make the decision and the choice to start over. Okay? So with that being said, this week's theme or the topic that I wanted to talk about centers around a couple of things, because as I mentioned in the opening, one of the things that I hear so much from women is that they commend me for where my life is right now, for the fact that I am able to know what my purpose is, to be courageous enough to follow my calling, to do the things that I'm most passionate about while working a full-time job, while raising two young girls, while maintaining a marriage, right? And I'm going to tell you guys that though it looks easy, it's not, right? Because although I share a lot of my life on social media and through my podcast, there's still so much behind the scenes things that I don't share, that you don't see, just because it's hard, right? And in those hard moments, I'm not going to whip out my phone and do an Insta story or shoot video and be like, yeah, look, my kids are having a meltdown. Me and the hubby are not getting along today. This event that I'm planning is falling through. Like, it's just in those moments, it's so hard to capture that because my mind is in the moment, right? And so for me, it's almost like I'm in survival mode and I'm figuring out how to best handle that situation. And what I will say is that I have never been happier in my life than I am at this present moment. And I will say that as far as my career, everything is great. As far as my marriage, everything is great. My children, God bless them, are healthy. They're growing exactly the way they're supposed to. I have really no major issues or complaints about where my life is right now, but it has not always been that way. This life that I've created for myself literally has been a decade in the making. And I say that because for the past, I want to say maybe 10, 11 years, I've been an active work in progress. And what I mean by that is that I wake up every single morning committed to living my best life. And what that means is that it starts with myself. And so, when my husband and I first got together, we've been together since 1998, right? We met in March. And actually, next month, we will be celebrating our 20-year anniversary. And when him and I met, I will tell you that he was probably the first serious boyfriend that I had ever had. And so I met him when I was 20. Prior to that, I dated, and I mean, I may have dated guys who I called my boyfriends, some that I cared about, but none that I would say I fell in love with, none that ever truly meant anything to me until I met my husband. And even then, when him and I met, I was not so focused on, I don't know, on cultivating a relationship, I guess, in the traditional sense of the word, because I was working part time. I was going to school full time. I still lived at home with my parents. I was really, really spoiled. I was so used to getting my way. I had no idea what the term compromise was. So for me, he was just someone that I was dating. But what happens is, when him and I met, we both were very upfront and clear on what we wanted and what we did not want. And what we both said we did not want was a relationship. We both were very adamant about that. We both said that was not what we were looking for. He had just recently come out of a 5-year relationship with someone. And, I was really focused on myself. I was a career driven individual. And for me, that was what was always most important. But you know what? Things happen, right? And so the lives that I guess we plan for ourselves hardly ever turn out the way we plan, right? Because God always has a bigger plan for our lives than what we have for ourselves. And so I would say fast forward maybe a year and a half to after him and I were dating, I was already giving homeboy ultimatums, right? And so here I was, the young girl who didn't want to have a relationship. It was Christmas time, and I remember telling him, you better buy me an engagement ring or don't buy me anything at all for Christmas. Basically saying a ring or nothing, and it was going to be over. Because at that point, I was so in love with him that I knew or I wanted to be married to him. And, we joke about this all the time. Like, I really feel like I pressured him into marrying me. But you know what? It ended up working out for the best, right? Because we've been together for 20 years. And at the end of the day, what I've learned is you cannot force a man to do anything that he does not want to do. And so it's not like I was pregnant, so he didn't have to marry me because we had a baby coming along. Though I nudged him and maybe I might have pushed him, right, to do it a little sooner than he may have wanted to, he took the plunge and he did it. But needless to say, we were both really young when we got married. Well, I guess I was younger than he was because he's older than me. But I was 23 when we walked down the aisle and got married. And I had no experience on being an adult, what that meant. And I really had no experience on being a wife or what that meant. And so I never had the opportunity to get to know myself, to grow into myself, to be independent in the sense that I never had my own apartment. I went from living with my parents and my sister to moving in with my husband after we got married. And so I didn't know what that independence was. And we struggled a lot in our marriage in the beginning. Well, not even in the beginning. I would say that for the first 10 years of our marriage, it wasn't easy. It was extremely hard. We were both trying to find our way in the relationship, in the marriage, but we were also growing, right? When you think about the fact that I met him when I was 20, by the time I was 23, I was already married, but I had no idea who I was, who I wanted to become, what my future was going to look like. And I was trying to kind of gain my independence in a time where I was supposed to be building a partnership with my husband, because really that's what marriage is, right? It's two people joining together. You become partners in everything, right? In love, in life, in business, because, sustaining a marriage, there's a business component to that when you're considering finances and what that looks like. Are you joining finances? How are the bills going to be paid? Are you going to be split? Are you going to have joint bank accounts? Like, it was just so much that I had not given thought to, and I don't think he gave thought to either. And we struggled so much trying to make it work because we didn't know how. And so all we had were the models of marriage from our parents, right? And so his parents have been together forever. I want to say over 50 years. And my parents have been together for over 30 or over 40, I guess. I'm 40, so longer than that, right? So we had these examples of what marriage was, but their marriages and the examples, that our parents were showing us was not going to work for us, right? Because we are a new type of married couple, right? And my husband and I were both college educated. So whereas in my parents' marriage, my father was always the quote unquote head of household. He was the one that was in charge over everything, over finances, over how me and my sister got raised, whether or not my mother was, allowed to do certain things. Like, he ruled our house with an iron fist. He was the man of the house in every sense of the word. And my mom kind of just fell back and let him be that leader. And part of that, though, also stemmed from her own experiences, from what she saw between her parents' marriage and how she was raised, and how the men, were always supposed to be the head of the household, and the women were supposed to kind of take the step back to the husbands, let them be in control, and pretty much support them in whatever way they needed that support. And the mothers were also the nurturers, the caretakers. They were the ones that were tending to the home. Back with my grandmother, like, she didn't work. She had 9 kids, so she was home taking care of children. And then my mom, I guess, based off of that same kind of cultural conditioning as to what a wife was supposed to be kind of fell in line with what she had believed a wife's role was. And, in my home, it was really weird because although we saw my mom really cater to my dad and she was at his beck and call, and, she would have to really wait on him hand and foot. Uh, and he was the breadwinner. He went out every day and he worked. My mom didn't. She in this sense, she had the luxury of staying home and really taking care of me and my sister for, I guess, the first 10 years of my life. We were in a position where she didn't have to work, and my father, his salary was enough to support us. But then once, my sister and I started getting older and we were, in school, and she no longer really had to take care of us with the same type of intensity. She wanted to go to work. And, in order for her to return to work, she had to ask permission. And it was just so weird seeing this dynamic and seeing their relationship, because my dad, by the very same token, though he expected my mom to be a certain way with him as his wife, he did not want that same fate for my sister and I. So, though this was what we were seeing, what we were hearing from my dad was, make sure you guys go to school, make sure you get your education, you're going to go to college. Education is something that no one can ever take away from you, and make sure that you use that so that you can get a good job, so that you don't have to depend on a man for anything. When you get involved with someone, you're with them because you love them, not because you need them. And so it was this weird dynamic of what his relationship with my mom was like, and how he did not want that for my sister and I. And again, that relationship works for them because they're still together and they are extremely happy. But when I got married, I had these kind of competing voices, right? I was struggling with what being a good wife was, what that meant in this new age. The fact that I was, a college educated woman, the fact that I was, on a track, a career path, it was just so different from what I had experienced. And so when in my own marriage, I just didn't know how to find a balance. And we struggled for years. And when I tell you that we probably had no respect for one another, at one point, things just were really ugly. Our arguments would get to the point where they were very disrespectful. And though there was never any physical violence or abuse, but there was definitely verbal, because again, we weren't respecting each other, and it was on both parts, not just his, but mine as well. And for a really long time, we went on that way. And, as a result, we separated many, 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 many times. And then we reconciled, and then we break up, and then we get back together, and then we break up. And, it went on like that for a really long time. And in the midst of that, we sought counseling in our church. We went on this retreat for a weekend sponsored by the Catholic Church, because although we weren't getting along, and although we didn't know how to make our marriage work, we did love each other. And so we would try to make things work. But again, we were so young and so selfish, right, that we could not let go of our own selfish needs long enough to see what the other one needed. And it was a struggle. And so, we did that retreat. it worked for a little while, but then it ended up not working. We then sought, marriage counseling, and we did every single thing that we could to make our marriage work. And I think in the end, really what did it was the fact that him and I said, enough is enough. Like, we can't keep doing this to ourselves. We can't keep doing it to each other. And so I think one of the very last times that we had broken up and we were talking about reconciling, we said, we're either, going to make this work, and we're going to start with a fresh, clean slate. We're going to leave everything that happened in the past, and we're going to start fresh. And either we're going to do that, or we're just going to separate, and this is going to be the end. And that was what it took, because I think once we had that conversation and once we both decided to leave things in the past, we really allowed ourselves to move forward. And then in between all of this happening, my husband, had been diagnosed with cancer when he was 30 years old. And I would say it was probably 2 or 3 years into our marriage. So we were newlyweds. So imagine trying to figure out how to be in a marriage, and then you get smacked with this kind of news and this life-threatening disease, and for a while that helped to put things in perspective for us, right? Because here was the man of my dreams, the person that I loved and I wanted to spend the rest of my life with. And he was battling a life-threatening disease, and it was really scary. And that also kind of helped us get our act together, because it made us realize that life is so short, and we were taking for granted our lives and each other. But fast forward all these years later, had we not gone through everything that we went through, our relationship wouldn't be where it is today. And so I see so many marriages and relationships break up, and often I wonder, like, did they really give it their all? Did they really try? And what is it, or what was it that broke them apart so badly that there's no point for reconciliation? And for me, I think aside from being physically abused, emotionally abused, and broken down to the point where you are just, like broken, I believe that relationships can be mended. And the reason that I say that is because more often than not, when you marry someone, right, there is something, some qualities that you saw in that person that made you fall in love with them, that made you feel like they could be the person you could spend your life with, right? But then shit happens, right? And then you realize, you come together, and you realize that you're different people, but you still have the love, right? The love is still the same. And so for me, and this is what it's always been, you have to constantly work on your relationship. Not saying that it's going to be, perfect and happy all the time, every single day, but you have to wake up every day committed, to making the relationship work and doing your part and making sure that your partner is getting what they need from you, that they feel fulfilled and that they feel loved, and like all of the things that made them fall in love with you, you have to make sure that you continue to do that. Because what happens in relationships is that we get comfortable and then we forget to continue doing the things that we did to get that person, right, to fall in love with us and to want to be with us. And that is a huge mistake, because no matter how long you're with someone, no matter how old you get, how old we get, we all have a need to feel loved, to feel wanted, to feel appreciated. That need never goes away, no matter how long you've been with someone. So if you somehow have neglected to give those things to your partner, then it's your responsibility to fix it, right? I mean, and vice versa, for them as well. Um, and so, so for us, once we got our marriage, intact, it seems like everything else started to fall into place, right? And so our marriage was thriving. And although our marriage was great, then we were struggling with having children, and a part of that was because he had gotten the cancer, diagnosis, and the chemotherapy does affect, sterility and all of, there was so many factors in that when we wanted to get pregnant, it was a struggle, so now here is something else that we as a couple, as a collective unit, have to deal with. And, that whole entire process was where I really began to find myself, and where I really started to realize that the things that I thought I wanted from my life were not as important as they once were. Because as I mentioned, I always thought that I wanted to be this career woman, right? I always wanted to be at the top of my industry. My goal was always to be a healthcare administrator. I wanted to run, a hospital, be the, head honcho in charge. That was what my dream was. And so everything I had done up until that point was for that to happen. And so I was working in a hospital. I was on a track, to get that CEO position. But then I felt like something was missing in my life. And that was that I wanted to be a mother. And so then everything else that I thought I wanted just became meaningless to me, because now all I ever wanted, now all I wanted was to be a mom. And that wasn't happening. And so what that did for me was it really forced me to be with myself, to see what I was lacking within myself, and how, I guess, the story that I had been telling myself for so long about not wanting to be a mom and not wanting kids and being this career focused woman was not what I wanted at that point. And I needed to be honest with myself about that. And it took a long time because I was feeling unworthy. I had really low self-esteem. I felt like there was no value or purpose in my life, because here I was, a woman who wanted to have a child. Women are created to give birth, right? And to be mothers. And yet my body was not doing what it was created to do. And so that in itself really took a toll on me. And I just felt less than. And so I had given up on myself. And I think because I had given up on myself, all of that negative energy I was putting out into the world was coming back to me. And it was why I was not getting pregnant and why I wasn't having, kids. And it wasn't until I realized that I needed to take control of my life and my future and actively work towards making that happen, that's when my life started to change. And so what I did was I actively sought out women and workshops and just different types of healing seminars that allowed me to reconnect with who I was at the source, right? So not this person who's career oriented, not this person who is driven or motivated by external success, but to connect with that inner being and that inner child and who we all are at our core, right? Because none of us are our titles or our homes or our jobs or any of these material things. That is not who we are. And so I was on a journey to really find myself and find what it was that made that gave me purpose, and find out those things that I was passionate about. And so the more I actively sought out these kinds of experiences, the more the universe would connect me with the people that I needed to be connected to. And so that all happened for me in the year 2011 when I attended, and I've spoken about this many times, but I attended the Visiones 2011 spiritual wellness retreat, and it changed everything for me. And for that entire year, all I did was focus on my inner healing and reconnecting with God, reconnecting with Source, and just really learning myself again. And in that process, because working with women was so integral to my journey and to my healing and to the manifestation of my oldest daughter, that was what I wanted to gift other women. I wanted to do for someone else what had been done for me with all of these amazing women that God had brought into my life. And that was how the Fierce Woman was born. And that is how all of this work that I do now manifested, right? It manifested as a need to be able to connect with other women and give them hope and be a reminder to them that they are not alone, that we all at some point in our lives are broken, but we don't have to stay broken, right? We each at any moment can change the narrative of our story. We don't have to be perfect all the time. It's okay to be a work in progress, right? And so the purpose of this episode, and I guess the reason why I wanted to share a bit of my backstory, is that I want you to trust your journey, even if you don't understand at the present moment why you're going through certain things or why God is continuously giving you certain experiences. Trust it. And if you find yourself recycling certain experiences, meaning, for example, you have yet to find a successful relationship, or you keep dating the same type of guys, right? And you end up in the same types of romantic situations. That's happening for a reason, okay? Because God will continue to send you lessons until you learn them. And so if you're continuously dating the same guy and having the same experiences, that is God telling you something. You need to learn something from those kinds of relationships and those experiences that you're not learning. And a lot of times it doesn't even have to do with the relationship itself, but it has more to do with yourself and how you view yourself and why you don't feel or believe that you are deserving of more than those types of experiences and relationships. And that is when you should be doing that inner self work. That's when you should be healing that inner child inside of you, right? And so I want you to let go of the idea or the plan that you keep telling yourself your life is supposed to look like, right? Because for me, back in my 20s, my life had me being the CEO, of a hospital, and being the one who called the shots and living this real fast paced, exciting, life, where you're kind of going off of adrenaline, and because you're the one in charge and you're able to, kind of say what goes. Like, that was what I had envisioned my life as being years ago, right? But that was not what God had planned for me. So here we are 15 years later, and I don't want to be a hospital administrator, because when I got that role and when I got the position, I ended up leaving it because I ended up finding out I was pregnant, and it was just, I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to be on call 24 hours a day as the leader of an organization, right? I didn't want to have to work weekends. And so these are all things that, although you think you want them at a certain point in your life, when you really step back to look at it and you get to know yourself and what you truly love and what you're passionate about, it allows you to shift. So I want you to let go of that idea of the life you thought you were supposed to live, and just allow yourself to be in the moment. Allow yourself to really dig deep within yourself and learn yourself and figure out who you are, what you truly want, what it is that really sets your heart on fire and makes you happy, and discover that thing that makes you want to get out of the bed in the morning. That is where your purpose is. So I'm going to end it on that note. And if this was helpful for you, if you learned anything about yourself throughout this conversation, please just shoot me a DM, shoot me an email, leave me a comment. I would love to continue the conversation and to engage with you. But until next time, you know how I end it, like I end it every episode. Go out there this week, be productive, stay focused, be committed to your own happiness, and crush some goals.